You know, it's a tragic tale, but whenever you design a vehicle in the performance market, you know, you always have a goal in mind. There's something that you wanted to do with it. And you almost think that when they came out with the Ferrari F50, they were thinking of GT racing, because this car was basically exactly what they wanted. It was a Formula One car with a GT body put on it. So Ferrari said, okay, let's do all this Formula One stuff. We've got the suspension mounted off the back of the transmission. I mean, this car is going to go out and just absolutely dominate GT racing. And it got screwed. And that's what I'm talking about. And we've talked about this in other episodes, because Gordon Murray came out with that T50. And he came out with that T50 with the same intent that they did on this F50. They said, we're going to show up there with this F50 and we're going to absolutely dominate this class of GT racing. And Gordon Murray with his T50 did the same thing with the hypercar class in Le Mans racing. He said, this car is going to show up. And I picked on the T50 for not looking very good. You know, I made fun of that thing's looks, but I said, if they do a racing version of this, because I guarantee you that's what he's going to do. That's exactly what they did. I was right then. I'm right now.
It looks great too.
It's going to, oh God, it's stunning. I mean, the race version of the T50 is just absolutely amazing, and the race version of this F50, same way.
The GT1,
oh my God, what an amazing car. And then they both got screwed. Because the Gordon Murray T50, tremendous downforce, did everything that I knew that guy was going to do, because he's a genius. And then the F50 is the same way. This F50 came out, and they did the GT version of this. I mean, you're talking about a 2,000-pound car with 750 horsepower. A real GT car, and it was going to absolutely dominate Le Mans racing with just no chance of anybody touching him. And then what does Le Mans do? They allow that 911 GT1 to come in. And that's exactly what they're doing with the hypercar class. They bring those Toyotas in, which basically are just the prototype cars. They're not hypercars. They're prototype cars that they brought over into the class.
They don't need to be in that class.
Absolutely destroyed the whole concept of the class before it even got started. And that's the same thing that they did to the F50. The F50 was going to go into GT1 racing and GT racing and FIA and absolutely crush everybody for 2 or 3 years until the Dodge Viper showed up. You know what I mean? And that was what I'm saying, is this car was going to be the king. And it's a lost chance at stardom that the F50 never got. Because the F50 gets beat on a lot. And I know we're talking about styling, because everybody looks at the F50 and goes, it's not that good a looking of a car.
I don't get that.
I know, I've picked on the car before because I didn't like the look of it. But it's the same thing as the Senna. And we've talked about the Senna before. When I first saw it, I said, oh my God, that's hilarious. I mean, I can't even believe how ugly and awful that is. And the same thing happened with this F50. I didn't know about the F50 GT. And then somebody
there's only 3 of them. I mean, a lot of people don't know
they only
about
made 3s. And then somebody showed me the F50 GT, and I said, oh, it's the same thing as the Senna. You know, they had this one concept, and then they said, here's where we're going to go with this. And then you see the F50 GT, and now all of a sudden the F50 is beautiful, because I see what they were doing. They were going to absolutely dominate Le Mans racing, and there's no way that anybody would have touched them back in 96, 97, 98. But then they let that Porsche GT1 in there, which I don't think it didn't belong, because they didn't even homologate the GT1 Porsche until a year after they were already racing it. And that's not fair. But so I see why Ferrari got angry. And if you're one of the, I think they made 6 chassis of the F50 GT, and then they completed 1 to 3 cars or something like that, and then you bought one with the right, you couldn't race it. You weren't allowed to race it.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
If you bought the chassis from Ferrari, you weren't allowed to race the car. You could just show up to events and do stuff with it. Yeah, I know, kind of sucks, but it was an amazing car that never got a chance to run.
I think what's really neat with this car too is that it's actually one of the second rarest Ferrari supercars that are out there, out of the whole lineup. You know, going from the 250 GTO to the F40 to the F50, the Enzo, and then the LaFerrari. It's the second rarest because they only made 350 of these. And unlike the F40, where they we're supposed to make a certain number, and those numbers they now think have gone way past what Ferrari originally said for the F40.
Right, yeah.
The F50 was actually placarded. So there's
they
plaques
numbered all the
within the front of the front compartment.
Yeah, I love that.
So each one of those, which is cool. They don't do that anymore, but
the thing that I do love about that Ferrari, it's got the 5-valve heads, which I love the sound of a 5-valve head. You ever get a chance to listen to a 360 Ferrari? Oh man, they sound fantastic. That's the 5-valve head version. There's different versions of that, but the 5-valve head 360s, just a stunning sounding cylinder head. I mean, it really sounds good. I mean, it's tough to compare it against the 458 because the 458 has a real Formula One kind of crazy sound and a Cosworth Formula One sound. This is a different kind of sound. This is a 70s era Formula One sound of the Formula One cars of that era. So it's.
You mean the F50?
Yeah, the F50 is a sound from like the 70s, like
sure.
If you watch Steve McQueen's Le Mans movie, you can hear that Ferrari sound, and that's the sound that this F50 has. So it's a different tone. I like the tone; it works for me. It's 8,500 RPM engine, so it's not screaming like the race motor. I mean, the 641 F1 car, which is what this was from, that spun to 13,000 RPMs, but it was a little 3.5 liter deal,
Yeah,
but
this is what, 4.7?
But still, back then in that era, yeah, the 4.7s. I mean, back then, spinning 8,500, man, I'll drink to that. Cue the whiskey, girl.
So I got to take it back to the design because that's a big debate piece on this. Is that the V12 came out of an F1 car, so there's no debate over that thing. But the design, they kept on saying it doesn't follow the wedge shape, which I don't understand. To me, I think it does. It's not as hard lined as the F40 is. But the other neat thing about this is that this is the only open roof Ferrari, supercar that ever came out. There was no hardtop versions of this. They were all roadsters. Up until the Aperta LaFerrari.
I never really paid much attention to that.
I didn't either.
Until I saw the F50 recently. I can't believe, you ever just go through your whole life and then some guy mentions a car and you say, I never even heard of that. And then you feel upset that you went this long without knowing about it.
Right.
That's what happened with this. I didn't know there was an F50 GT car.
Yeah.
And then when I saw
that's a hardtop.
Yeah. And when I saw it, and it's got a roof scoop.
Oh.
Yeah. And I saw the F50 GT and I said, oh my God,
those
that's
wheels,
stunning. Yeah.
Aerodynamics
And now, of course, you know me. I picked on the F50 for being an ugly car. It's not ugly to me anymore. it's a derivative of that F50 GT car.
Yeah.
And you got to respect a lot about this car anyways. I mean, it's got, like I said, we've talked about the suspension's all mounted like a Formula One car.
Cool.
But there is something that just grinds me really bad. There's never been a vehicle that I've ever looked at that I loved the one wheel and I hated the other wheel. The front wheels on that car are absolutely hideous. The rear wheels on that car
got a lip.
Perfect.
It's got a lip on
yeah,
the
they
rear.
Inverted the design, and you can't do that because it's an ugly, ugly design when it's inverted.
Yeah, it was early 90s, so they had...
It was early 90s. Everybody was
90s.
Smoking weed. Nobody knew. Yeah, that's what it is. It's ugly. The front wheel's ugly.
Something else just unique, and it's kind of just a quirk, but the rear view mirror in this thing. It was specially designed for the Ferrari F50, and if you look at it, like the back of it's like red, but the way that it's cut out because of the buttress, I guess you would call it.
Oh, okay.
For where the roll cage for the seats are.
Yeah.
It would be cutting into the mirror the entire time, so they cut that part of it out so that it doesn't block it.
That's the thing is, if you know anything about Italians they're not generally as tall as most Americans, and they got smaller feet and stuff like that. And I know I'm generalizing, but if you take a look at Italian cars, I'm just saying, is that if you get into an Italian car, you have to have small feet, and you have to be a shorter guy because everything's geared that way. I mean, I've got big, wide feet, so I have to really watch it on my pedals because one will hit the other and the whole deal. And in my Ferrari, I need to be a little bit shorter so I can properly, and I'm not a very tall guy, but I need to be a little bit shorter so I can properly use the rear view mirror, because when I sit up proper, it cuts into it. But if I drop my head down a little bit, I can use the rearview mirror and see way behind me. Wow. So, but it's usually just cops chasing me anyway. So, let's just forget about that. There's a different driving style required with this car. And that's the thing that if you
careful?
See, well, no, that's the thing. If you people talk about driving this car, it's got a lot of understeer in the car, and the new Corvette is the same way. And I've told people all the time, they go, "Oh, the new Corvette's got a whole ton of understeer." Well, learn how to drive the car as an understeering car. I mean, dive in hard and pitch the car and rotate it while it's down on the nose.
In your $3 million hypercar.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. But I mean, that's how you would have to drive it if it wasn't. But
yeah.
Obviously if it turns into a race car, they're going to work on the splitters and get the dive planes going and all that stuff. But I'm surprised in that because there's a tremendous amount of percentage in the back of this car. I mean, it's got a real high rear percentage, and it causes the car to have a pretty bad push, and it really understeers a lot. I'm sure that if they got on a race day, I'm sure they would have that sorted out. But if you don't sort that out, because I know we entered this with saying, hey, it's a big Le Mans winner, but it wouldn't be a big Le Mans winner if they didn't sort that out. Because if it ate up front tires, it wasn't going to win races anyways. You'd have to stop too much, and your lap times would slow down.
All you F50 owners that are going to race your car, listen up.
Yeah, watch out for understeer. But another problem with this car is because it's a small inch engine is that it is an absolute dog below 5,000 RPMs. I mean, they just don't make any power. And that's the thing that I like about like the Ferrari engines, the flat plane crank V8 cars, is that they're still rev good. They still make decent torque down low, but they don't hit like $5,000 and all of a sudden jump on like another 200 horsepower. They're a little nice, smoother transition. Whereas the biggest complaint about this is don't fall below 5,000 because man, it falls off hard.
Yeah.
And so I mean, there are some good things and bad things about this. But the one thing that does bug me about this that I think is going to come back to haunt them is that, or came back to haunt them back then, but is that the horsepower rating. I don't think it's accurate.
Why not?
They're saying that this was like a 517 horsepower engine, but it's 4.7 liters and it only runs to 8,500 RPM. In order to make about 517 horsepower, figure an average efficiency, and you're going to need to spin a little over 9,000 to do that. And I mean, hey, maybe they've got a little better RAM efficiency than I thought, or maybe they're counting, the roof scoop in on the deal. I don't know, but I would say it's probably closer to 460, 470 for horsepower based on the RPM per cubic inch.
Or do you think because of what the initial idea was for them to go into racing with it, that they undershot the numbers and that it actually makes more?
No, I think that they just lied.
Dyno. You need a dyno in F50 now.
Is there an alarm going off? Everybody knows that I like racing beat up old junk cars. I mean, I like throwing them around. I like the way that they slide around. And that's the thing is I'll watch modern racing today, but I still get excited loading up old races from the 60s and 70s and watching them just slide and beat those cars around. Because, I mean, that's really what excites me, what I'm all about. And that's the thing that I love about this F50 is because when you walk up to it, you can just look at this and go, this is just a chassis that a guy sets on that he tries to muscle it around the racetrack.
Man and machine.
Exactly. That's about the perfect way to describe it. This is absolute man and machine. The engine's bolted to the bulkhead, which is affixed basically to you. I mean,
it's an old tube chassis, right?
Yeah, no, it's a monocoque.
Well, and the frame around it started
and then they bolt the engine to the bulkhead, and then the chassis, the rear suspension's bolted on the back of the transmission. I mean, you're not going to get any more man and machine than what this F50 is all about. I mean, it's absolute this to me is probably going to be the ultimate in taming the bull and enjoying the ride.
You hear that, guys? He said bull when he said Ferrari.
Well, I know that, but my whole point is that you can feel.
Stallion.
You can feel. All right, we'll go with stallion. Okay, but you can feel, you can look at this car and go, this is an absolutely visceral experience that's going to be as clunky mechanical as you can possibly get. And I don't really want to use the term clunky, but I mean when you shift a Ferrari manual box,
it's going to be.
It has a real cool feel to it.
Oh
that's
yeah,
part
that
of the excitement.
Shifter.
Yeah, that's part of the excitement in it. And I was surprised that carbon tubs, because I know that they came around in Formula One, but it took a long time for Ferrari to really embrace the carbon tub, because even the 458, 488 stuff, that's still not a carbon tub, and they were doing it back on the F50 20 years ago.
And they were doing stuff, well, at least with the body panels and stuff on the F40 previously.
Yeah,
so
and that's what I'm saying, is that Ferrari is a little slow to the game, because McLaren jumped on the carbon tubs right away. And I mean, they took off with it. They've got a fantastic tub that they keep redefining and making better and better.
With, so.
Yeah, and Ferrari's a little late to the game on that, but I don't think it's that important, because that 458 chassis is still so fast.
The other thing too is if you look at the carbon, it's just cool to see the technology differences. You know how far it's come over the years.
Yeah.
But like even just looking at the body panels on the F50, the very few that I've gotten to see in person, you can see the weave coming through the paint.
I love that, and
I don't know if it's good,
but I love that. That's actually a styling credit to me when you go to look at it, and you can look at it because they put such a light coat of paint on that thing to keep the weight down, which it's still a pretty heavy car. I mean, it's a 3,000-pound car, so it's not super light, but it's a big car. I mean, if you see one of these in real life, they're big.
There you go. Here's his wide tires, everyone.
Yeah, I know. Absolutely. I mean, that makes me happy. I like big wide tires. But I like to be able to, I like seeing the weave. I thought that was really attractive. And it's nice because if somebody wrecks one, how are you going to get that weave back?
Right. Yeah,
you know
that's
what I mean?
Years of...
Yeah, so you know for sure that thing's good. So on that note, I think it's time. I want to toast or roast this thing. I hear a squealing noise.
Toast or roast.
Now, I have an odd opinion about styling to this, because I'm going to have to qualify mine. So I need to hear your number so that I know that I'm not absolutely had too much to drink or out to lunch.
Well, you may have had too much to drink. However, I've always been like an advocate of this car. I've always tried to push this car up, because a lot of the conversations I've been in about this car.
Yeah. You see these models right here? These are Tony's.
I built those when I was a kid.
Yeah, he's had these things for how many years have you had these?
I don't even want to know.
He's that old that you have to count decades on that stuff. But I'm just saying is that I know you're a huge F50 fan.
Yeah, I like it. And don't get me wrong, I think the F40 is great, and there's a lot of other cars out there, but I just never understood why people dislike this car so much. I thought it was such a cool car. And up until recently, they didn't really have the respect in the markets either as far as pricing. Just recently, they started going up. I mean, of course, it was always expensive, but they didn't start going up in value until recently.
Yeah, they're starting to become really crazy now.
$3 million they started
which is a real insane number.
So I think this car is really cool. I gave it a really, I mean, to me, it's an average styling number, but I gave it a 74 for styling. And I wanted to go higher. I really did, but I didn't want to upset the boat too much.
My biggest problem with this is that I have such a bad taste in my mouth for years on this car, because I've always said it was a really ugly car.
It's not the whiskey.
Well, I'm going to stick to my guns on this one, because if someone would have asked me before I saw the F50 GT what my styling number was on the F50, that's what I have to go with. And the only reason I have to go with that is because no one knows the F50 GT exists.
Yeah,
so I can't let it qualify my styling rating on the F50.
Absolutely not.
So I'm going to give it a really poor number, and I'm sorry to do this. I'm going to give it a 54.
Woo-hoo.
I know, but it's about where the car deserves to be, because the F50 GT never got a chance to be super popular so that you could see that in the design. In performance, It was never really a high-powered car. It was high-powered for the time,
sure,
but it wasn't really crazy. And I know we talked about the fact that in the GT Hyperclass deal, it got totally screwed by the Porsche 911 because the Porsche 911 it only made 600 horsepower. But it had such small frontal area that I get that it wasn't going to have a chance. The F50 wasn't going to have a chance to compete against that because I don't know what the torque was probably going to be on the GT1, but you do turbos, you know. Where do you think the torque's going to be on the Porsche?
On the Porsche GT1?
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, it had to be way above this. This is only 350.
500 pounds, yeah. So the race version of the F50 was 400 pounds of torque. So, I mean, Ferrari was right in not racing the car because it wasn't going to stand a chance against that GT1 that got allowed in the class that shouldn't have been in the class in the first place. So I'm going to give it a low performance rating because it never got a chance to race. And it wasn't a real high powered version of the engine. It was an 8,500 RPM engine. They should have at least done a 9,500 RPM version of it. These cars aren't going to get 50,000 miles on them anyways. You know what I mean? So who cares? You know, do a 9,500 RPM version, and it would have been a lot higher because you would have respected the fact that they were pushing the limits of that in there. Yep. But they didn't push the limits, so I'm only going to give it a 50.
Oh, okay. Well,
yeah.
We're not too far off, and I will say there's a resident down here that's actually getting his 001 chassis number, F50, completely restored. Not that it needed anything, I'm sure, but just an overhaul of the entire thing. And it's going to be done soon, so hopefully we get to see that. I'm sure we will eventually get to see it down here. But as far as performance-wise and just, again, respect the fact that this was a V12 from an F1 car. It's probably one of the last road cars that ever got a F1 derived engine, except for, of course, the AMG 1 that's coming out eventually. So I actually gave this a 70, so not too far off from my design number, but I really wanted to give it something just because of the spirit that's in it.
Yeah,
and
I'm not going to argue with him on that one. I'm going to give him a toast. Good job, Ferrari. You really did a good job on the F50. But next time, 9,500 RPM, please.
Or 13.5.
Or 13.5. Congratulations, you got a toast. Well, thanks for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe. And you know what they say. If you have an opinion that's different than ours, keep it to yourself.